The coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago, but Dr. Emily Watson barely noticed. Her fingers moved across the translation interface with practiced precision, while alien symbols flickered on the screen before her. The signal had been repeating for 6 days now, growing weaker with each cycle, and she was no closer to understanding what it meant. Around her, the research lab hummed with quiet activity. The exploration vessel, Prometheus, had been drifting at the edge of known space for 2 weeks, its crew conducting routine surveys of empty star systems. Nothing exciting ever happened out here, which was exactly how most of the crew preferred it. Deep space exploration was supposed to be boring. The signal had changed everything. David Reed found her hunched over her workstation, surrounded by empty food containers and crumpled notes. The captain looked as tired as she felt, his usually neat uniform wrinkled from too many sleepless nights. He pulled up a chair beside her desk and sat down heavily. "Any progress?" he asked, keeping his voice low. The rest of the research team was finally getting some sleep, and he didn't want to wake them. Emily rubbed her eyes and gestured at the screen. "It's definitely artificial. The mathematical sequences are too precise to be natural phenomena, and look at this." She highlighted a section of the transmission. "These patterns repeat every 47 minutes, but with slight variations. It's like someone is trying to teach us their language." David studied the scrolling symbols. They looked nothing like any human writing system, flowing and curved like water frozen in motion. "What do you think they're saying?" "I think they're desperate." Emily pulled up another screen showing the signal's strength over time. The line sloped steadily downward. "Whatever is broadcasting this is dying. The power source is failing, and fast." She had been working on the translation for days, building a basic understanding of the alien grammar through the mathematical sequences. Mathematics was universal after all. 2 + 2 = 4, whether you were human or something else entirely. The aliens had started with simple equations, then moved to more complex concepts, slowly building a vocabulary. David watched her work, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the slight tremor in her hands from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. "Maybe you should take a break. Get some real rest." "I can't." Emily highlighted another section of the signal. "Look at this part. I think it's coordinates, star positions, distances, maybe even a map of some kind. They're trying to tell us where they are." The captain leaned closer. The coordinates pointed to a system about 12 light years away, in a region that human surveys had marked as uninhabited. Long-range sensors showed nothing unusual there, just another collection of dead worlds orbiting an ordinary star. "There's more," Emily continued. She pulled up a new section of the translation, her excitement overriding her exhaustion. "I think this part is about something they call the ancient enemy, or maybe old hunger. The grammar is still unclear, but the emotional context is unmistakable. They're terrified." David felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years of deep space exploration, he had never encountered anything truly hostile. Space was vast and mostly empty, filled with wonders, but few dangers. The possibility that something dangerous lurked out there had always been theoretical. Emily's fingers flew across the keyboard as she accessed another section of the signal. "And here, this is the part that really worries me. They mentioned something called fire starters. The mathematical context suggests they're looking for something that can help them fight whatever this enemy is." "Fire starters?" David frowned. "What could that mean?" "I don't know. But given that humans are the only species we know of that actually started by controlling fire." She left the implication hanging in the air. The captain stood up and walked to the lab's main display screen. It showed their current position relative to Earth and the outer colonies. Humanity had spread to a dozen worlds in the past century, but they were still a young species by cosmic standards. The idea that aliens might be specifically looking for them seemed impossible. "Show me the rest of it," he said quietly. Emily brought up the final sections of her translation. The words were fragmentary, incomplete, but their meaning was clear enough to make both humans fall silent. "Worlds burn. We are few. Time runs short. Seek the fire starters. They alone can stand against the devourers." The lab fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. David stared at the alien message, his mind racing through the implications. If this was real, if some unknown enemy was destroying alien civilizations, then humanity might be walking into a trap by investigating. On the other hand, if they ignored the signal and something terrible was indeed spreading through the galaxy, Earth and the colonies could be next. "How confident are you in this translation?" he asked finally. 80%, maybe more. The mathematical foundation is solid, and the emotional context is consistent throughout the message. Emily saved her work and turned to face him. "David, I think we need to investigate. If this is a genuine distress call and we ignore it..." The captain nodded slowly. Protocol demanded that he report the signal to Earth Command and wait for instructions. But the transmission was getting weaker every hour, and by the time Earth responded, it might be too late to help whoever was sending it. "Prepare a complete report of your findings," he said. "I'll need to brief the senior staff in 2 hours." Emily watched him head for the door, then called out, "David, what are you thinking?" He paused in the doorway, his expression grim. "I'm thinking that if someone is desperate enough to broadcast a distress call across 12 light years of empty space, we have a moral obligation to answer it, even if it means walking into the unknown." After he left, Emily turned back to her workstation. The alien signal continued its steady broadcast, growing weaker with each repetition. Somewhere out there, beings unlike anything humanity had ever encountered were crying out for help, placing their faith in mysterious fire starters they had never met. She pulled up the star charts and began plotting a course to the signal's origin point. Whatever waited for them in that distant system, humanity was about to take its first step into a larger and far more dangerous galaxy than anyone had imagined. The alien ship drifted among the wreckage like a broken jewel, its crystalline hull cracked and scarred from whatever battle had taken place here. Emily pressed her face against the viewing port of the rescue shuttle, staring at the impossible geometry of the alien vessel. It seemed to bend light around itself, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Atmospheric readings are stable," reported Tom Mitchell, the shuttle pilot. "Whatever these beings breathe, it's close enough to our mix that the environmental suits should handle it." David checked his equipment one final time before moving toward the airlock. The past 3 days had been a nightmare of preparation and discovery. When the Prometheus had arrived at the signal's origin, they found a star system that had once hosted a thriving civilization. Now it was a graveyard. Shattered worlds hung in space like broken ornaments, their surfaces cracked and lifeless. Massive. Structures that might once have been cities or space stations tumbled slowly through the void, dark and cold. Most disturbing of all were the planets themselves. They looked drained, as if something had literally sucked the life out of them. The alien ship was the only thing still functioning in the entire system, its weak distress signal the only sign that anything had survived whatever catastrophe had occurred here. Emily followed David through the airlock, her translation equipment secured in a protective case. The inside of the alien vessel defied human understanding of architecture. Corridors curved in directions that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, and the walls pulsed with a faint inner light that felt organic rather than technological. They found the survivor in what might have been a command center, though it looked more like a garden than a bridge. Crystalline formations grew from every surface, connected by flowing streams of liquid light. At the center of it all stood a being that took Emily's breath away. It was tall and impossibly graceful, its body composed of what looked like living crystal that shifted and changed color as they watched. When it moved, it made no sound. And when it spoke, the words came not through the air but directly into their minds. "You came," the being said, its mental voice filled with wonder and exhaustion. "The fire starters came." Emily activated her translation interface, though she quickly realized it wasn't necessary. The alien was communicating through some form of telepathy that bypassed language entirely. Still, she wanted to record everything for later analysis. "We received your signal," David said carefully. "We came to help." The alien moved closer, and they could see that its crystalline body was damaged, hairline cracks running through what might have been its torso. "I am called Resonance of Stars, last speaker for the builders of Kepler. We sent the call across the void, not knowing if any would hear, not knowing if any would care." "What happened here?" Emily asked, gesturing at the devastation visible through the ship's transparent walls. Resonance of Stars seemed to dim, its crystalline form flickering like a dying flame. The hunger returned. After millions of cycles of peace, the devourers have awakened from their long sleep. The alien moved to one of the crystalline formations and placed what might have been a hand upon its surface. Suddenly, Emily's mind was flooded with images and sensations that weren't her own. She gasped and staggered, feeling David's steadying hand on her shoulder. She saw a galaxy alive with countless civilizations, each unique and beautiful. Worlds covered in crystal cities that sang in harmonies that touched the soul. Ocean planets, where beings of pure energy danced through liquid light. Garden worlds where every plant and animal had been carefully cultivated to create perfect ecological balance. And then she saw the hunger. It came not as ships or armies, but as a spreading darkness that consumed everything in its path. Worlds went silent one by one, their populations simply vanishing as if they had never existed. The darkness fed on life itself, growing stronger with each world it devoured. The ancient records speak of the first war. Resonance of Stars continued, its mental voice heavy with remembered sorrow. When the hunger first rose, the galaxy united against it. We called ourselves the gardeners, species dedicated to nurturing life wherever it could flourish. For 1,000 years, we fought. More images flowed into Emily's mind. Vast fleets of impossible beauty, each ship unique to its creators. Battles fought not just in space, but across dimensions of reality that humans had no names for. And through it all, the growing realization that conventional weapons were useless against an enemy that fed on energy itself. "We found a way to stop it," the alien continued. "The flame of Genesis. A weapon that could burn through the barriers between dimensions and create zones where the hunger could not exist. But the price..." The being's light dimmed further. The weapon required willing sacrifice. Entire species chose to burn their life force to power it, becoming one with the flame itself. Emily saw the final battle, if it could be called that, not explosions and destruction, but billions of beings across hundreds of worlds choosing to sacrifice everything they were to create barriers of pure energy. The hunger recoiled from these zones like a living thing in pain, retreating into the dark spaces between galaxies. "We thought it was gone forever," Resonance of Stars said. The survivors scattered across the galaxy, swearing never again to create weapons of such terrible power. We builders chose to become caretakers, nurturing new life on dead worlds, helping young species find their place among the stars. David found his voice. But it came back. 3 cycles ago, the first worlds went dark. At first, we thought it was natural disaster or civil war. Such things happen. But then the pattern became clear. The hunger had returned, stronger than before, having learned from its defeat. It no longer simply consumes. It learns, adapts, grows smarter with each world it takes. The images in Emily's mind shifted to show the recent destruction. Entire star systems going dark in a matter of days. Fleets of ships attempting to evacuate populations, only to find their technology failing as the hunger's influence spread. Worst of all were the worlds that had tried to fight back. Their aggression had only made the entity stronger. "Why us?" Emily asked. "Why call for the fire starters?" Resonance of Stars turned to study her with eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. "Because the ancient records speak of a young species that would emerge from their birth world through mastery of flame, a people who carried within them a resistance to the hunger's influence, forged by their world's unique history." The alien moved to another crystalline formation, and new images filled their minds. Earth, but not as they knew it. This was Earth, millions of years ago, its surface scarred by some ancient catastrophe. In those scars, they saw familiar patterns of consumption and darkness. Your world was touched by the hunger long ago when it first arose. Most life was consumed, but some survived, changed by the experience. Those survivors became the ancestors of all Earth's life, carrying within their very genes a resistance to psychic domination. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. "You're saying we evolved from survivors of the hunger's first feeding?" "Your species' unusual aggression, your adaptability, your resistance to mental influence, all of these traits mark you as the fire starters of prophecy. You alone among all the galaxy's children can stand against the hunger without being consumed by it." David was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Finally, he asked, "What do you need us to do?" Resonance of Stars brightened slightly, hope flickering in its crystalline form. "Help us rebuild the flame of Genesis. The components were scattered and hidden after the First War. But together we might be able to find them. With your resistance, to guide us and our knowledge to empower you, we might yet save what remains of the galaxy." Emily looked out at the devastated star system, then back at the alien being that had placed the survival of countless worlds in humanity's hands. "How long do we have? The hunger moves faster now, perhaps 50 of your years before it reaches the core worlds. Perhaps less." Resonance of Stars' mental voice grew urgent. "Every day of delay means billions more lives lost. Will you help us, fire starters? Will you kindle the flame that can burn back the darkness?" David met Emily's eyes, seeing his own. Determination reflected there. They were about to commit humanity to a war beyond imagination. But what choice did they have? If the hunger continued its advance unchecked, Earth and all the colonies would eventually fall. "We'll help," he said, simply. "Tell us where to start." The emergency session of Earth's Colonial Council had been going on for 6 hours, and tempers were running dangerously high. Emily sat in the witness chair, her throat dry from explaining the same impossible story over and over again. Around her, the most powerful people in human space argued about the fate of their species. "You're asking us to believe in space monsters," Admiral Torres slammed his fist on the table. "Ancient evils that eat planets, mystical weapons powered by sacrifice. This sounds like something out of a bad science fiction novel." Director Hayes leaned forward, her expression more measured but equally skeptical. "Even if we accept Dr. Watson's translation is accurate, we're talking about technology and concepts completely beyond our understanding. How do we know this isn't some elaborate trap?" David stood up from his seat in the gallery. "Because I've seen the evidence. The dead worlds, the drained planets, the wreckage of an entire civilization. Something destroyed that star system, and it wasn't natural." Resonance of Stars had been remarkably patient throughout the proceedings, its crystalline form motionless in the specially constructed chamber that housed it. When it finally spoke, its mental voice carried a weight that made everyone in the room fall silent. "I understand your doubt. My own people dismissed the first reports when the hunger returned. We had grown comfortable in our long peace, unwilling to believe that old nightmares could become real again. The alien's form flickered with what might have been sadness. 3 billion builders lived in this sector when the darkness came. Now I am the last. Emily pulled up the latest intelligence reports on the main display. It's not just their word anymore. Look at these readings from our deep space monitoring stations. The screen showed a map of the galaxy with dark zones spreading, slowly but steadily inward. Entire sectors had gone quiet over the past months, their regular communications simply ceasing without explanation. Most disturbing were the reports from ships that had attempted to investigate. Those that returned described equipment failures, crew psychological breakdowns, and the growing sense that something vast and hungry was watching them. The pattern is unmistakable, Emily continued. Something is moving through the outer rim, consuming everything in its path. The rate of expansion is accelerating. Admiral Torres studied the display with professional interest. If this threat is real, we need to mobilize the fleet immediately. Every ship, every weapon we have. That would be a mistake, Resonance of Stars interrupted. The hunger feeds on aggression and conflict. Military action against it only makes it stronger. This is why the first war lasted so long and cost so much. Director Hayes stood up, her expression grim. Then what do you propose? That we simply surrender? We gather the components of the Flame of Genesis, David said. It's the only weapon that's ever worked against this thing. A weapon that requires mass suicide to operate, Torres shot back. You're talking about asking billions of people to volunteer for death. The room erupted in arguments again, voices raised in anger and fear. Emily watched the display showing the spreading darkness and felt a chill of despair. Every hour they spent debating was another hour the hunger had to grow stronger. The argument was interrupted by an urgent communication from the outer colonies. The face of Governor Walsh appeared on the main screen, his usual composure cracked by obvious terror. Earth Command, we have a situation at New Melbourne. The entire star system has gone dark. No communications, no energy signatures, nothing. It's like the whole place just stopped existing. Admiral Torres leaned forward. What about the evacuation fleets? We had ships en route to the outer colonies. Gone. 3 full carrier groups just vanished. The last transmission we received was... Walsh paused, his voice breaking. The captain said something was in his head, trying to make him forget who he was. The room fell silent. New Melbourne had been home to 12 million people, one of humanity's most successful colony worlds. If it was truly gone, then the threat was no longer theoretical. Emily stood up, her decision crystallizing. I'm going with Resonance of Stars to find the first component. We can't wait for consensus. Every day of delay costs more lives. Absolutely not, Torres declared. I won't authorize a mission based on alien fairy tales. Then I'll go without authorization, Emily replied calmly. This is bigger than military protocol, Admiral. This is about survival. David moved to stand beside her. The Prometheus is still under my command. We'll take volunteers only, people who understand the risks. Resonance of Stars brightened slightly. The first component lies in the ruins of Nexus Prime, a world that served as a great library for the ancient gardeners. The journey will take 14 of your days, but the path is clear. Director Hayes looked around the room, seeing the mixture of fear and determination on every face. If you're wrong about this, if it's a trap or a delusion, you'll be leading good people to their deaths. If we're wrong, we lose 1 ship and 30 volunteers, Emily replied. If we're right and do nothing, we lose everything. The debate continued for another hour, but the momentum had shifted. Reports continued to arrive from the outer rim, each one painting a darker picture of the spreading catastrophe. Entire shipping lanes had gone silent, and the few automated probes that had attempted to investigate the dark zones had simply stopped transmitting. Finally, Director Hayes called for a vote. The authorization to investigate the alien weapon passed by a single ballot with strict conditions. The mission would be classified, and if no contact was made within 30 days, it would be assumed lost. As the council session ended, Emily found herself standing in the hallway with David and a dozen other volunteers. They were scientists, engineers, and spacers who had heard the evidence and chosen to act despite the risks. "You know this might be a one-way trip," David said quietly. Emily nodded, her mind already focused on the journey ahead. "Better then. Sitting here while the galaxy burns." Resonance of stars approached them, moving with that eerie grace that defied human understanding of physics. "The component we seek is more than just a weapon. It is a repository of knowledge, containing the memories and experiences of entire civilizations. To claim it, we must prove ourselves worthy of their sacrifice." "What does that mean?" asked Dr. Lin, one of the volunteers. "It means the ancient gardeners built safeguards into their greatest treasures. The component will test us, judge our intentions, and determine whether we have the wisdom to wield such power responsibly." Emily felt a chill at the alien's words. "And if we fail the test?" Resonance of stars' crystalline form flickered with colors that had no human names. "Then we join the billions who chose to become one with the flame of Genesis, adding our voices to the eternal song of sacrifice that burns at the heart of creation." The group stood in silence, absorbing the implications. They weren't just volunteering for a dangerous mission. They were potentially volunteering to become part of a weapon beyond human comprehension, their individual existence dissolved into something vast and terrible and necessary. "When do we leave?" David asked. "Now," the alien replied. "The hunger grows stronger with each passing moment, and the components grow harder to reach. Soon, even the flame of Genesis may not be enough to stop what is coming." As they walked toward the shuttle bay, Emily looked back at Earth hanging in the viewports, like a blue jewel against the stars. She wondered if she would ever see it again, or if humanity's homeworld would become just another dark zone in the hunger's expanding empire of silence. Behind them, emergency sessions continued as humanity's leaders struggled to comprehend the scope of the threat they faced. Evacuation plans were drawn up and discarded, military strategies debated and abandoned. None of them had experience with an enemy that grew stronger when attacked, that fed on the very qualities that made humans successful. The Prometheus prepared for departure, its crew augmented with builder technology that hurt to look at directly. Somewhere in the dark between the stars, an ancient evil was stirring, reaching out with tendrils of influence that could drain the life from entire worlds. And humanity's only hope lay in finding weapons built by civilizations that had chosen to sacrifice everything rather than let the darkness spread. The Firestarters were going to war, whether they were ready or not. The ancient library world of Nexus hung before them like a massive tomb, its surface covered in structures that defied human understanding of architecture. Emily stared through the viewport of the Prometheus, trying to comprehend the scale of what she was seeing. The buildings stretched from horizon to horizon, their crystalline spires reaching into the thin atmosphere like frozen prayers. "The gardeners called it the repository of all things," Resonance of Stars explained, its mental voice heavy with reverence. "Every species that joined the Alliance contributed their knowledge, their art, their memories. When the first war ended, they sealed it and withdrew from the galaxy, unable to bear the weight of what they had done." David studied the sensor readings with growing concern. The planet's surface showed massive energy signatures, but they were erratic, almost chaotic. "Those look like defense systems, still active after all this time." The builders were thorough in their protections, the alien confirmed. "Only those deemed worthy may enter the deepest vaults. The trials ahead will test not just your resolve, but your understanding of sacrifice." The past 2 weeks had brought nothing but bad news from Earth. The hunger's advance had accelerated dramatically. consuming 3 more colony worlds in as many days. Worse, the entity seemed to be learning from each encounter. Ships that tried to evacuate civilian populations found their crews turning on each other, influenced by some psychic pressure that grew stronger near the consumption zones. Emily had spent the journey studying the data Resonance of Stars had shared about the Flame of Genesis. The weapon wasn't just a tool of destruction, it was a bridge between dimensions, powered by conscious sacrifice and guided by the collective will of those who chose to become part of it. The more she learned, the more she understood why the Ancient Alliance had scattered after using it. The shuttle bay doors opened to reveal a landing party of 12 humans and their alien guide. Each person had volunteered knowing they might not return. But Emily could see the fear in their eyes as they prepared to descend to the library world's surface. Dr. Lin checked her equipment one final time. The atmospheric readings are breathable, but there's something else down there. Energy patterns I've never seen before. The memories of the dead, Resonance of Stars said simply. This world holds the preserved consciousness of 1 billion beings who chose sacrifice over surrender. Their voices echo in the crystal matrices below. The descent to the surface took 3 hours, navigating between automated defense platforms that tracked their progress with sensors older than human civilization. The structures they passed were beautiful and terrifying, their surfaces carved with symbols that seemed to shift and change when observed directly. They landed in a plaza surrounded by towering spires that hummed with barely contained energy. At the center stood an entrance that looked more like a work of art than a doorway. Its archway formed from interwoven streams of crystallized light. The first component lies in the Hall of Final Choices, Resonance of Stars explained as they approached the entrance. But beware. The path ahead will show you the true cost of the power we seek. The moment they stepped through the archway, reality shifted around them. Emily found herself walking through corridors that existed in more dimensions than her mind could process. The walls showed scenes from the First War, billions of beings making the ultimate sacrifice to power weapons beyond imagination. She saw a species of gaseous beings who chose to burn their entire atmospheric composition to create a barrier of pure energy. She witnessed crystalline entities like Resonance of Stars who shattered themselves into component particles to fuel stellar manipulation devices. Most disturbing were the humanoid species who looked almost familiar, walking calmly into machines that would unmake them at the quantum level. "This is what we're asking people to do," Dr. Lin whispered, her voice shaking. "This is what the weapon requires." David pressed forward, his jaw set with determination. "And this is what happens if we don't." He gestured to a section of wall, showing the Hunger's first rampage across the galaxy, entire civilizations vanishing into darkness. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, dominated by a structure that hurt to look at directly. It was the first component of the Flame of Genesis, a crystalline matrix, the size of a building that pulsed with the trapped energy of countless sacrificed lives. Around it stood the preserved forms of the beings who had operated it during the First War, their bodies transformed into living crystal by the weapon's power. "They are still conscious," Resonance of Stars explained. "Still aware, still part of the weapon's targeting system. They chose to become eternal guardians, burning forever to maintain the barriers between dimensions." Emily approached one of the crystalline figures and gasped as its eyes opened, ancient beyond measure, but still recognizably alive. When it spoke, the words came not as sound, but as pure meaning transmitted directly to her mind. "Firestarter," the Guardian said. "We have waited so long for your coming. The weapon calls to you, but do you understand the price?" Images flooded Emily's consciousness. She saw herself as part of the weapon, her individual identity dissolved into something vast and collective. She experienced the burning agony of conscious sacrifice multiplied by billions, the weight of every life that would depend on her choice. But she also saw the alternative. Earth consumed by darkness, humanity scattered and broken, the galaxy, itself becoming a lifeless void feeding an entity that could never be satisfied. "I understand," she said aloud. The Guardian's crystalline form brightened. "Then you may claim what you came for. But know that once awakened, the component will call to your people. Some will answer, and their sacrifice will be the foundation, upon which the new flame is built." David stepped forward. "How many? How many lives will this cost?" "As many as choose to give them," another Guardian replied. "The weapon draws power from willing sacrifice. The greater the need, the more who will answer the call." Emily placed her hands on the component, feeling its vast power resonating through her bones. The crystalline matrix was warm to the touch, pulsing with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. As her fingers made contact, she felt the consciousness of every being who had ever powered it, their voices joining in a chorus that spoke of duty and sacrifice and hope. The component began to shrink, condensing its massive form into something small enough to transport. But as it changed, Emily felt something change within herself as well. The weapon had marked her, chosen her as its primary operator. She would never be quite human again. "We have what we came for," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "But the hunger draws closer. We need to find the other components quickly." As they prepared to leave the ancient library, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The defense systems had detected something approaching from deep space, something vast and hungry that made the crystalline structures resonate with fear. "It found us," Resonance of Stars said, its form flickering with panic. "The hunger has learned to track the components. It knows what we're trying to do." David grabbed his communication device, trying to reach the Prometheus. Static filled the channel, along with voices that spoke in languages that had never existed. The entity's influence was spreading, affecting their technology and their minds. "We need to get off this world now," he ordered, "before it cuts off our escape route." As they raced back to their shuttle, Emily clutched the component against her chest. She could feel its power calling out to humans across space, offering them the chance to become something greater than themselves. On Earth and the colonies, people were already beginning to dream of crystal fire and eternal purpose. The hunger was coming, and humanity would have to choose between individual survival and collective sacrifice. The Firestarters had found their first tool of salvation, but the price of using it would test everything they believed about the value of individual life versus the needs of the many. Behind them, the ancient Guardians resumed their eternal vigil, their crystalline forms burning with the patience of beings who had already given everything and were prepared to give more. The first component was claimed, but two more remained hidden across the galaxy, and the entity that had destroyed countless civilizations was now actively hunting for the weapons that could stop it. Time was running out, and the real war was about to begin. 3 months after claiming the first component, Emily no longer looked entirely human. Her skin had taken on a faint crystalline quality that caught and reflected light in impossible ways, and her eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. The transformation was spreading to others who had volunteered to help operate the Flame of Genesis, marking them as something between human and living weapon. The War Council aboard the redesigned Prometheus included representatives from across human space, though many attended only as holographic projections. The hunger's influence had grown so strong that physical travel between systems was becoming impossible. Ships that ventured too close to the consumption zones simply vanished, their crews overwhelmed by psychic pressure that turned them against each other. Latest reports show 17 colony worlds gone dark in the past week, Admiral Torres announced, his weathered face grim with exhaustion. "The evacuation fleets can't keep up with the rate of expansion. We're losing the outer rim entirely." Director D.O. Hayes studied the tactical display with growing despair. The dark zones now covered nearly a quarter of human space, spreading inward like a malignant cancer. How long before it reaches Earth? 6 weeks, maybe less, David replied. He had aged years in the past months, the weight of command and impossible choices etched into every line of his face. The entity is no longer just consuming worlds. It's actively hunting us, following our evacuation routes and cutting off escape paths. Emily floated near the center of the council chamber, her transformed body no longer requiring a chair or even solid footing. The first component of the Flame of Genesis hung suspended beside her, its crystalline matrix pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Through it, she could feel the consciousness of every human who had volunteered to become part of the weapon. The numbers were staggering. Nearly 1 million people across the colonies had answered the component's call, offering their lives to power humanity's desperate gambit. They came from every walk of life, united only by their willingness to sacrifice everything for the chance to stop the hunger. The second component is secure on the research station, Dr. Lin reported. She had been part of the team that retrieved it from the ruins of the Gardner homeworld, a mission that had cost them half their volunteers. But activating it will require another 200,000 volunteers. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the room understood what those numbers meant. They weren't talking about military casualties or acceptable losses. They were discussing the willing self-sacrifice of nearly 1 million human beings to power a weapon none of them fully understood. "There's something else," Emily said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the ship's hull. "I've been in contact with the component matrices. The hunger isn't what we thought it was," she gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show patterns of energy that hurt to look at directly. It's not a single entity. It's a collective consciousness, but not by choice. Millions of years ago, dozens of civilizations tried to merge their minds to survive some cosmic catastrophe. The process went wrong, creating something that could only maintain coherence by consuming other conscious beings. Resonance of stars who had remained silent throughout most of the meeting suddenly brightened with understanding. The trapped civilizations within the hunger, they're still there, still aware, but unable to break free from the collective. Which means we might not have to destroy it, Emily continued. The Flame of Genesis isn't just a weapon. It's a tool for separating merged consciousnesses, for healing damaged psychic structures. We could potentially free the trapped civilizations instead of simply burning them away. Admiral Torres leaned forward. "You're talking about performing surgery on something the size of a star system. How is that even possible?" Emily's transformed. Features shifted into what might have been a smile. "By going inside it. The hunger's influence is strongest at its core, but that's also where the original trapped consciousnesses are most concentrated. If we can reach the center with an active flame component, we might be able to unravel the whole structure from within." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. It wasn't just a suicide mission anymore. It was a journey into the heart of an entity that existed partially outside normal spacetime, where the laws of physics bent around psychic forces beyond human comprehension. "We'll need volunteers for the core mission," David said quietly. "People willing to pilot ships directly into the hunger's heart, knowing they'll never come back." "I'll go," Emily said immediately. "The first component has bonded with me. I can guide it more precisely than anyone else." "As will I," Resonance of Stars added. "My people helped create the original flame. It's fitting that the last builder should help kindle the new one." Over the next hour, the volunteer list grew. Scientists who wanted to study the hunger from within, engineers who could maintain the ships under impossible conditions, and ordinary spacers who simply refused to let others face the darkness alone. By the time the meeting ended, they had enough volunteers for 3 ships. The final 2 weeks of preparation passed in a blur of desperate activity. Across human space, the volunteers chosen to power the flame components made their final preparations. They said goodbye to families, recorded messages for future generations, and gathered in specially constructed facilities where the transformation could take place safely. Emily watched through the components' connection as humans across dozens of worlds chose to become something more than individual. They dissolved into crystalline matrices one by one, their consciousness joining the growing chorus of voices that would guide the weapon. Each sacrifice added to the flame's power, but also to its wisdom and compassion. The hunger, meanwhile, had accelerated its advance. It seemed to sense what humanity was planning, and the consumption zones expanded frantically toward Earth and the core colonies. Ships fleeing the outer rim brought reports of impossible phenomena, space itself seeming to hunger, time flowing backward in isolated pockets, and the growing certainty that something vast and desperate was trying to reach them. The final confrontation began not with fanfare, but with quiet determination. 3 modified ships, their hulls reinforced with builder technology and their cores powered by active flame components, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the hunger's domain. The entity's influence hit them immediately. Reality became fluid around the ships, and crew members reported seeing impossible geometries and hearing voices in languages that predated human evolution. But the flame components created barriers of stable space around each vessel, protecting their crews from the worst of the psychic assault. Emily piloted the lead ship, her consciousness partially merged with the weapon she carried. Through it, she could feel the hunger's true nature, more clearly than ever before. It wasn't evil, just broken beyond repair. Billions of individual minds trapped in a collective structure that caused them constant agony, able to find relief only by consuming others and adding their voices to the eternal scream. The journey to the entity's core took subjective hours, but objective days. Time moved differently within the hunger's domain, flowing at rates determined by psychic pressure rather than physical laws. As they penetrated deeper, the trapped civilizations within the collective became more apparent. Emily saw fragments of their original cultures, beings of pure thought who had built cities from crystallized mathematics, aquatic species who had composed symphonies from the songs of dying stars, and countless others whose achievements had been lost when they became part of the hunger's desperate embrace. The core itself was a nexus of impossible energies, where the original civilizations' attempt at mental merger had gone catastrophically wrong. At its center burned a structure that looked like a twisted version of the flame of Genesis, powered not by willing sacrifice, but by the eternal suffering of those it was supposed to protect. "Now," Emily whispered, her voice carried across all. 3 ships by the component network. The flame of Genesis activated not as a weapon, but as a healing tool. Instead of destroying the hunger's core, it began carefully separating the merged consciousnesses, untangling millions of years of forced mental fusion. The process was agonizing for everyone involved, but gradually the collective began to dissolve. One by one, the trapped civilizations found their individual voices again. Some chose to fade into peaceful non-existence. Their long torment finally ended. Others, strengthened by their ordeal, spread across the galaxy as beings of pure energy, seeding new life on worlds the hunger had drained. Emily felt her own consciousness expanding as the flame component fully integrated with her being. She was no longer entirely human, but she was still herself, still able to choose compassion over destruction. Through her connection to the weapon, she guided the healing process, ensuring that no consciousness was lost unnecessarily. The hunger's death was not an explosion, but a release. Across the galaxy, the dark zones began to brighten as drained. Worlds received new energy from the liberated civilizations. The entity that had terrorized the cosmos for millions of years simply let go, its component minds finally free to find peace. In the aftermath, as rescue ships arrived to recover the survivors of the core mission, Emily stood on the observation deck of a builder vessel and watched new stars being born from the energy of the departed hunger. The galaxy was healing, and humanity had played a crucial role in that healing. Resonance of stars approached her, its crystalline form now brighter than it had been since they first met. The builders have decided to return to active participation in galactic affairs. There is much work to be done, many worlds to heal. Emily nodded, feeling the weight of her transformation and the responsibilities it brought. And humans will help. We've learned something important about the value of willing sacrifice versus forced suffering. Around them, the stars blazed with renewed life as the galaxy began to recover from its ancient wound. The fire starters had kindled more than just a weapon. They had lit a beacon of hope that would burn eternal among the stars, guiding future generations toward a better understanding of what it meant to be truly alive in an infinite cosmos.